My son brought his girlfriend to Thanksgiving dinner, and she had a handshake that lasted exactly 1 second too long. I noticed it the moment she walked through my front door. Firm grip, perfect eye contact, smile that hit at exactly the right angle. 53 years old, and I've shaken enough hands to know when someone's practiced theirs. Her name was Simone. Simone Whitfield. She said it the way people say things they want you to remember. Slow, with a pause after. Like she was letting it settle. My son, Kevin, was 41. He'd been divorced for 3 years after a marriage that ended quietly, without drama, the way some things just exhaust themselves. He'd been careful since then. Cautious in the way hurt people become cautious. So when he called me 2 weeks before Thanksgiving and told me he was seeing someone and that it was serious, I was glad. I told him to bring her. I should have paid more attention to the fact that he didn't sound glad when he said it. The dinner was my wife Carolyn's production. She'd been planning it since October. The good tablecloth. The centerpiece with the dried orange slices. The pie that takes 2 days. We have 3 kids. Kevin's the middle one. Oldest is my daughter Ren, 36, lives an hour away with her husband and 2 boys. Youngest is my son Elliot, 38, still figuring things out, perpetually between jobs, but somehow always cheerful about it. It's a full house when we're all together. Loud. Good loud. Simone arrived with Kevin at 2:30. She was dressed well. Not overdressed, just precisely right, which is its own kind of overdressed if you know what to look for. She brought wine, a bottle she mentioned twice by name. She complimented the house, the smell from the kitchen, Carolyn's earrings. Carolyn lit up. Ren smiled politely. Elliot immediately started talking to her about something he'd read online. I watched Kevin. He laughed when she laughed. He touched her elbow when they moved between rooms. He did all the right things, but there was something slightly delayed about it, like a man hitting his marks on a stage he hadn't fully memorized. I told myself I was reading too much into it. I was 64 years old and suspicious by training, and sometimes that's a liability. I'd spent 22 years as a fraud examiner for a regional bank group, then another decade consulting for law firms on financial crime cases. I retired at 62, and Carolyn had been very gently suggesting for 2 years that I try to be a normal person at family dinners. I tried. Simone sat next to me at the table. She started asking me questions around the time we moved to the main course. Friendly questions, warm questions, the kind of questions that don't feel like questions at first. How long had we lived in this house? Did we have any plans to downsize? Had we thought about the taxes on a property like this if something were to happen, God forbid? God forbid. I answered simply. I watched her listen. After dessert, when Carolyn and Ren had gone to the kitchen and Elliot was putting on a football game, Kevin stood up and said he was going to help clear. And as he passed behind my chair, he dropped something onto my lap. A folded piece of paper. His handwriting. Kevin has terrible handwriting, always has. Ever since he was a kid, cramped and tilted like it was trying to hide. I recognized it before I even unfolded it. I kept my eyes on the football game. I opened the note under the table. Dad, I don't know how to say this out loud, but something is very wrong. Please don't agree to anything she suggests. I'll explain when I can. I folded it back up. I put it in my shirt pocket. Then I picked up my coffee and asked Simone how she'd gotten into financial planning. She'd founded her own firm 8 years ago, she said. Before that, estate planning at a larger company in the city. She specialized now in what she called legacy asset protection for families in the transition years. Her phrase, the period between active income and retirement, when people often made decisions without fully understanding the tax implications. I nodded. I asked clarifying questions. I let her think I was a man learning something new. What she was describing wasn't illegal on its face. There are legitimate firms that do exactly that kind of work, but there are also people who build very convincing versions of those firms and use them to identify elderly or near-elderly targets with assets, establish personal relationships, generate trust, and then steer those targets into financial products that either don't exist or exist only to funnel money somewhere it won't come back from. It's called elder financial exploitation. It's the fastest growing category of financial fraud in the country. I'd spent years helping banks identify and prosecute people who did exactly this. I was, as it turned out, a very bad target. Kevin came back to the table. He sat down across from me and I looked at him once. Just once. The way fathers and sons can sometimes look at each other when language isn't available. And I gave him the smallest nod I could manage. He exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. I didn't confront her. That's not how this works. What you do, when you suspect something like this, is you document, you gather, you create a record before the other person knows there's a record being created. Years of doing this professionally had made it second nature, the way some men can change a tire in the dark. That night, after everyone had gone home and Carolyn was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and wrote down everything I could remember from the dinner. Every question Simone had asked. Every answer I'd given. The exact phrasing she'd used. The order she'd brought things up. Timestamps where I had them. Then I called Kevin. It was past 11. He answered on the second ring. "I got your note," I said. He was quiet for a moment. Then, I didn't know how else to do it. I asked him to tell me everything, from the beginning, and not to leave anything out, because he thought I'd worry. He'd met Simone 4 months ago at a benefit gala for a local hospital. She was poised, funny, direct. He liked that she didn't play games. They started seeing each other. It moved quickly. She was attentive in the way that felt, at first, like chemistry. Around the 6-week mark, she started asking questions. About his house. Did he own it outright? About his retirement account. Was he happy with his returns? About his relationship with his parents. Were we in good health? Were we financially comfortable? He'd mentioned, without thinking, that I'd retired from a long career in finance and that we owned our house free and clear. He'd mentioned, also without thinking, that Carolyn and I had a vacation property upstate that we'd owned since the 90s. Within 2 weeks, Simone had suggested it might be worth having his parents speak with someone about legacy planning. She knew just the person, she said. She was the person. "She asked me to make sure you liked her," Kevin said. His voice was flat. "Before Thanksgiving. She said it was important that she make a good first impression. She said families trust these decisions more when everyone's comfortable with the advisor." I asked him if she'd ever made any specific financial proposals. "She emailed me a document last week," he said. "Some kind of preliminary analysis. It had your name on it, and Mom's." "She'd never spoken to us," I said. "I know." She had created a preliminary financial profile on 2 people she had never met, using information extracted from their son over 4 months of a romantic relationship she had initiated at an event she had likely attended for exactly this purpose. I thanked Kevin. I told him he'd done the right thing. I told him to act completely normally with her for the time being. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time. Then I called an old colleague of mine. His name is Phil Drummond. We'd worked cases together for years, and he moved into elder fraud prosecution for the county DA's office after I retired. It was late, but Phil and I have the kind of friendship where you answer late calls. He answered. I told him what I had so far. "Send me everything," he said, "and don't tip her." The next 2 weeks, I became a very enthusiastic potential client. I called Simone directly. Kevin had given me her number, told her his father was curious and wanted to ask a few questions. She called back within the hour. Her voice was warm, unhurried, perfectly calibrated. I told her I'd been thinking about what she'd mentioned at dinner, about legacy planning, and that Carolyn and I had actually been meaning to have that conversation for a while. I could hear her smile. We met for coffee. I brought a notepad and asked questions that made me sound like a man who was just now confronting his own mortality and finding it slightly overwhelming. She was good. I'll give her that. She never pushed. She listened more than she talked. She framed everything as being for our benefit, for Kevin's future, for the grandchildren we'd eventually have. She explained the investment vehicle she recommended, a private equity structure that would allow us to transfer certain illiquid assets, meaning the vacation property, into a managed trust that she would oversee, generating returns while protecting the value from estate taxes. It was, when you understood what she was actually describing, a scheme in which we would sign over the deed to a property worth around $400,000 to an entity she controlled, in exchange for projected returns from a fund that almost certainly did not exist. I asked her if she had documentation on the fund's performance history. She had a folder ready. The documents were impressive, formatted, detailed, full of the right terminology. They would fool most people. They had probably fooled other people. I photographed every page while she was refilling her coffee. I sent the photos to Phil that evening. Phil called the next morning. "The fund doesn't exist," he said. "The management company listed is a registered LLC, but it's been dormant for 6 years. The address is a UPS store." He paused. "You know what else? She's done this before. Different name. We've got a case out of Franklin County from 4 years ago. Elderly couple lost their lake house. Different name. I thought about that." "What name?" I asked. He told me. I wrote it down. Then I ran it through a few databases I still had access to through my consulting work, and what came up was a pattern. 3 states, 6 years, a series of LLCs, a trail of asset transfers and disappeared principals. Simone Whitfield was one identity. There had been others. She was not a woman who had started a fraudulent firm. She was a professional, moving systematically through regions, targeting recently widowed or newly retired homeowners and their families, getting out before the legal machinery could catch up. Kevin was not her target. Kevin was her method. I was her target. We set the meeting on a Thursday afternoon, 10 days later. Carolyn knew by this point I'd told her everything, and she'd handled it with the same steady practicality she brings to most things, though I noticed she held my hand for a long time after I finished explaining. We agreed she would be present at the meeting. We agreed she would act as a woman cautiously interested, occasionally hesitant, occasionally warming. She is a better actor than I am, frankly. Phil had people ready. 2 investigators from the DA's office, in a vehicle down the street. We were wired. Not dramatically, nothing like television, just a small device, a conversation, everything legal. Simone arrived right on time. She wore a blazer. She carried the same leather folder. We sat at the dining room table, the same table where Kevin had dropped his note into my lap 3 weeks before. Carolyn brought coffee. Simone laid out the documents. She walked us through the structure, the property transfer, the trust, the projected returns over 7 years. She had a signature page ready. I let her get all the way through it. Then I asked her how things had gone for the Morrisons in Franklin County. The silence lasted about 4 seconds. Not long, but long enough. Her face didn't collapse. She was too controlled for that. But something behind her eyes recalculated. "I'm sorry," she said. "The Morrisons," I said. "George and Helen. They lost a lakeside property in 2021. The LLC involved had some documentation similarities to what you've shown us today. I was curious whether that case had resolved." She started to say something about not knowing what I was referring to. I told her she could take a moment if she needed one. She looked at Carolyn. Carolyn looked back at her pleasantly and sipped her coffee. Simone looked at the folder on the table. Then she looked at me. "I think there may have been a misunderstanding," she said. "There wasn't," I said. Phil knocked on the door 45 seconds later. I won't pretend it was dramatic in the way movies make these things dramatic. There was no shouting. Simone became very still and very quiet. She asked for a lawyer immediately, which was the smartest thing she'd done since she walked through my door. The investigators were professional and efficient. The whole thing was over in under 20 minutes. Kevin came over that evening. He sat at the kitchen table while Carolyn made tea, and he was quiet for a long time. I let him be quiet. "How long did you know?" he finally asked. "I suspected at dinner. I confirmed it over the next few days." He nodded. He was turning his coffee mug in his hands. I really thought, I know," I said. "I should have seen it. She does this for a living," I said. "She's had years of practice. You weren't careless. You were normal." He looked up. "How did you know?" "At dinner. I told him it wasn't any one thing. It was the questions she asked in the order she asked them. It was the timing, too many specific inquiries before she'd had any reasonable basis to be curious about our finances. It was the way she watched me when she thought I wasn't watching her. It was the handshake. The handshake, he said. Too practiced, I said. Most people don't think about how they shake hands. She thought about it. He almost smiled. Not quite. Carolyn set tea on the table and sat down with us. We stayed there for a while. The three of us, not talking about very much. The kitchen was warm. Outside, November had settled into the kind of cold that makes a lit window look like something worth coming home to. I didn't know how to tell you, Kevin said at one point. I thought you'd think I was paranoid. Or that I'd made a bad choice. You told me, I said. That's what mattered. The case moved through the system over the following months. A woman named Simone Whitfield, which was not her original name. Her legal name turned out to be something else entirely, changed twice in the past decade, was charged with fraud, identity misrepresentation, and elder financial exploitation across 2 states. The Franklin County case reopened. Other cases were identified. She had operated under at least 4 identities over the course of her career. The Morrisons did not get their lake house back. That's the part nobody likes to talk about. The legal outcomes are rarely as clean as the stories, but Kevin is fine. That's what I think about most. He took some time before dating again, which I respected. He spent more time at the house, dinners on Sundays, occasional weeknights. He and Elliot started watching football together, which is something they hadn't done since they were teenagers. Small things, family things. Before any of this happened, Kevin hadn't known what I'd spent my career doing. I'd always described it vaguely. Finance, compliance, some consulting. I was a private person about work, maybe too private. After everything came out, we had a long conversation. I told him about the cases I'd worked, the patterns I'd learned to recognize, what financial exploitation actually looks like from the inside. He was quiet while I talked. Then he said, "Why didn't you ever tell us any of this?" I thought about it. "I suppose I wanted you to trust people," I said. "I didn't want to hand you my suspicion." He thought about that. "Well," he said, "maybe next time hand me a little of it." Carolyn hung Kevin's note on the refrigerator for a while. Not the original. The original is in a folder in my desk because I keep things. But she photographed it and printed it out and put it up with a magnet, which is Carolyn's way of deciding something matters. It's not there anymore. We repainted the kitchen in the spring and it came down. But I know the words. Something is very wrong. Please don't agree to anything she suggests. I'll explain when I can. He couldn't say it out loud, but he found the way to say it. Every day, I am grateful that he did. And every day I am grateful that 64 years of living and 22 years of work, and all those cases I sat across the table on, left me with exactly the right ears to hear it. Some things you can't teach your children. Some things you can only hope that when the moment comes, the instinct is there, that the hand reaches out, that the note lands where it's supposed to. It did. We were okay. I've thought a lot about what made any of this possible. Not the investigation part. That was just training, muscle memory, decades of sitting across tables from people who were counting on me not to see what I was seeing. That part wasn't remarkable. What was remarkable was Kevin. He was 41 years old. He'd been hurt before, in the quiet way adults get hurt when something they believed in turns out not to be what they thought. He had every reason to talk himself out of his own instincts, to tell himself he was being paranoid, that Simone was fine, that the questions she asked were normal questions people ask when they're getting serious about someone. Most people, at 41, with that kind of history, would have done exactly that. They would have swallowed the discomfort and said nothing. He didn't, and I keep coming back to that, because I think the decision to say something, to write those words on a piece of paper and drop it into my lap at a Thanksgiving table with the woman sitting 12 feet away, that took something I can only call moral courage. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet, costly kind. The kind where you don't know how it's going to land, where you risk looking foolish or paranoid or disloyal, and you do it anyway because something in you insists that staying silent would be wrong. That's not a skill anyone teaches you directly. It's something that develops slowly, out of choices made over years. The small ones, the ones that seem low stakes at the time. Whether you tell the truth when a comfortable lie is available. Whether you trust what you observe or let other people talk you out of it. Whether you believe that your perception of a situation is worth defending. Kevin had built that in himself, quietly, without my knowing it. That matters more to me than anything else that came out of that fall. What Simone built was the opposite. Years of intelligence. Genuine intelligence. She was not a stupid woman, applied entirely toward the project of taking from people who trusted her. That kind of sustained effort, pointed in that direction, hollows something out over time. It has to, and it finds its ending, eventually. Not because the universe enforces a ledger, but because deception at that scale requires an ever-increasing number of things to hold together, and the more complex the structure, the more places it can crack. Hers cracked in my dining room on a Thursday afternoon, across from a man she'd badly underestimated. The math was always going to catch up. It just needed the right set of variables. I think about the Morrisons in Franklin County sometimes, a couple who did everything right. Trusted a professional, followed advice, signed their name, and lost a property they'd spent their lives building. That part doesn't resolve cleanly. There's no wisdom I can offer that makes that fair, because it isn't fair. What I can say is that staying informed, staying curious, staying willing to ask a second question when the first answer is too smooth, that is not a guarantee. But it is the only real defense available to any of us. Not suspicion for its own sake, but attention. The willingness to look carefully at what is actually in front of you and to say something when what you see troubles you. Kevin gave me that chance by trusting his instincts and finding the courage to act on them. I gave us that outcome by having spent years learning how to pay attention. Carolyn held steady through all of it the way she always does, which is its own kind of strength, and one I don't thank her for nearly enough. We were okay. We are okay. And I don't take that lightly.